Hello, everyone. This is Piero San Giorgio. Very happy today to host for the third time Peter Schiff. Peter, you are the CEO of Euro Pacific Asset Management, the host of the Peter Schiff Show, which I encourage everyone to subscribe to. But more importantly, you have predicted for almost 20 years, probably more than 20 years, just like me, but you have a bigger audience, that gold is the way to save money and to invest for the future. And we've been vindicated now that gold is almost an all-time high, up and down a few percentage, but basically we are on the way up. My first question to you is, what made you so sure 20 years ago and over these 20 last years that this was the what would happen?
Well, I mean, I could see the fiscal trajectory of the United States, although not just the United States. A lot of the major economies in the world were, committing the same sins, maybe not to as large a degree, but they were still expanding their money supplies, borrowing a lot of money, and so it was obvious that monetary debasement, inflation was the way the world was going to be headed. And so that was going to favor gold. And I knew that the system that we had in place, that remains in place today, but that is in jeopardy, and I think we're already underway at moving away from it, where the dollar is the primary reserve currency, and all the other central banks accumulate dollars and then use those dollars to back their own currencies. I knew that that would come to an end because we would just over issue the dollars and take on too much debt, and the future value of the dollar would call into question, and that foreign central banks, the rest of the world, would be looking for a way out of the dollar, and the gold would be the most likely and maybe the only viable alternative to the dollar. And I think we kind of accelerated that impetus with the sanctions on Russia under Biden to really highlight to the world the risks that it takes by utilizing the dollar in that way. Not just do they run the risk of dollar depreciation, but of sanctions. And of course, the longer the world maintains this relationship, the larger the global imbalances become. And right now, the Trump administration is making these trade imbalances the focal of his presidency. He wants the trade imbalances to shrink. He doesn't want the U.S. to run these big deficits. And so that means that, the world is not going to be subsidizing the U.S. economy as much, and it's not going to be buying as many treasuries to, park its trade surpluses. So we're really moving in a direction that would result in more gold if you're not going to be warehousing as many dollars.
Yeah, I remember seeing you on interviews over mainstream media many times, facing people who said that no, this is impossible. Gold wouldn't go up. Gold has outperformed the market over the last 20 years. And why do you think people were so against? Are they both in the system, or they don't see it, or they have vested interest of saying no, gold wouldn't go up over the last years?
Well, I mean, Wall Street, they don't make a lot of money selling people gold. In fact, they generally don't sell gold. And if their clients want to buy gold, they talk them out of it. They want to get them into something where they can generate more fees. But in some cases, they just may not understand it. They just are very bullish on the U.S. and they see no reason to own gold. It doesn't pay any interest. It's just a metal that sits there. So why own it? They generally don't recommend that people go out and buy wheat, or live cattle or copper, so why recommend gold? I mean, they don't understand the monetary nature of gold and what makes gold different from other commodities, and why it's, an important store of value and a diversifier in a portfolio. I think they will start to appreciate that over the years. Right now it's mainly been central banks who see the reason to buy gold. I think investors will, see that reason. Both retail investors who have been selling gold and gold-related stocks for years now, and institutional investors are going to realize that they need to own some gold. And of course, when everybody wants to buy gold, the price is going to be a lot higher.
Now you have clients all over the world, and I presume, and clearly, do you see different patterns on how different cultures, different regions of the world, different countries buy gold? And also, do you see patterns in you have people who come, they put everything they have or a big chunk of what they have in, or they go incrementally? What kind of differences do you see as an analyst of your own market,
Well,
if you say?
my gold business predominantly serves, Americans. Um, but I know that, if you look at India, for example, or China, people look at gold, differently than the average American who doesn't look at it at all. I mean, they go out and they buy a lot of gold. They look at gold as a measure of wealth and as a store of value. And I think it's, still ingrained in their culture. It was ingrained in the US culture at one time, especially when gold was legally, constitutionally money. Gold and silver were money. But in recent decades, Americans have forgotten about gold by and large. I mean, there's some Americans like my customers at Schiff Gold. I mean, they get it, but that's a small number of people relative to the 300 plus million Americans who are oblivious to gold. You have people, they go and they take these videos where they offer people some gold, or a chocolate bar, and they'll take the chocolate bar. I mean, they have no idea the value of gold. But that's going to change. I think probably Americans were a little bit more, back in the 1970s when everybody saw all the inflation and gold was going from $35 an ounce to 850. Probably more Americans were aware of gold at that time. But they've gotten accustomed to prices not going up very much, and that was in large part due to China. They were absorbing our inflation. We sent them our inflation, and they sent us all their stuff. So it's a great deal for us. Wasn't such a great deal for them. Although Donald Trump looks at it the other way. He thinks that they were screwing us instead of us screwing them. But we got all the stuff, and they just got our paper. But as we stop exporting our inflation to China and more of our inflation stays here in the United States, and we really start to see prices going up, even much more so than we saw under Biden, that could cause people to rediscover gold in America.
Now, of course, I live in Switzerland, and here the gold mints are working 24/7. They do all the shifts to produce gold. Do you see that the BRICS countries are accelerating the accumulation of gold that they have for their own economies and currencies of maybe even currencies of the future? And you see that same trend starting. There's a lot of rumors, and for sure, gold is a market full of rumors all the time. You see the same thing starting to happen in the US. You see the Western financial system starting to accumulate gold again after selling so much over the last 2 decades.
Well, the BRIC nations certainly have the largest foreign exchange reserves because they've been, enjoying these huge trade surplus with the United States. And so, they've been using their reserves predominantly to buy treasuries and mortgage-backed securities and things like that. So, they've been shifting their focus towards gold over the last year or two, but they still have a lot of dollars to divest and, move into gold. So I think that process is going to continue. In Switzerland, the Swiss currency has depreciated less than just about any other currency. Just recently, we almost made a new all-time record low in the dollar against the franc. We hit a 14-year low, but we were within a few percentage points of an all-time low. You needed, I think, about $1.25 to buy 1 Swiss franc. And in 1971, when we went off the gold standard, you could buy the Swiss franc for 23 cents. So the Swiss franc has held on to a lot more value. I mean, sure, you still need more Swiss francs to buy an ounce of gold, but not nearly as many more dollars as you need to buy that ounce of gold. But I think the rate of dollar depreciation is going to accelerate as our deficits skyrocket and we can't find as many foreigners to buy our treasuries, which is basically what's going to happen. And so the Federal Reserve is going to be called on to buy the treasuries that the rest of the world doesn't want and that Americans can't afford. And that means even more money printing, because the Fed can't buy treasuries without printing up the money to pay for it. And so that's debt monetization. You know, we were calling it quantitative easing for a while, but we just wanted to dress it up a bit so it didn't sound as bad. But it really makes America a banana republic, just without the bananas.
Yeah, of course, the question is always, when you invest in anything, is compared when it goes in appreciates, but compared to what? And in terms of gold and other things like silver and other precious metals, perhaps, clearly the paradox is that, for example, for a Swiss investor like me, accumulating gold over 25 years, it has been a great investment, probably one of the best. However, not as good if I was living in the US and earning my money in dollars and trying to put my savings or my investments into something that would not depreciate because of inflation as much as a dollar, of course, and the rest. And you have a very good. As I listen to your show, one of the reasons the stock market went up also quite a lot over the last few years is also inflation. It's also compared to a shrinking dollar. So uh, when you advise your customers or anyone on the internet, um, what's the end goal? When are you going to sell the gold to go back and to do what with it? I mean, you see the thing, you
Well,
invest, you store, you hoard, but then what?
well, we've been buying a lot of the gold mining stocks recently
Yeah.
at my asset management company. In fact, I've even been advising my gold bullion customers to favor the mining stocks right now because they're so cheap relative to the gold that's already been mined. You're buying the gold that's still in the ground. But you know, I look at gold as a form of savings. You know, it's and so when would I spend my savings? Well, when you need the money, maybe you need it for something, or you want to buy something else that looks cheap. Maybe stocks go way down. I mean, the Dow Jones, when gold hit almost 3,500, you know, a week and a half ago, um, you could buy the entire Dow with 11 ounces of gold. Now, in the year 2000, you know, 2001, January 2001, you needed 40 ounces of gold to buy the Dow. Now you can buy it with 11. Well, I think in a few years, you might be able to buy the Dow with 2 ounces of gold. And that might be a good trade, right? Hey, I want to buy stocks. Let me use some gold to buy these cheap stocks because I think they're going to go down. You know, I remember it wasn't that many years ago that the Swiss had a referendum to require the central bank again, the Reserve Bank, to have some gold behind the Swiss franc. And I think the Swiss government spent a lot of money like to advertise against that.
Yeah.
And it didn't pass. But it would have certainly been better off had Switzerland owned more gold and less U.S. treasuries, or, you know, whatever. It buys a lot of tech stocks and stuff like that. I mean, the Swiss bank is like a giant hedge fund because it gets loaded up on so many foreign stocks to keep the Swiss franc from appreciating. Right? The Swiss franc would be a lot more expensive if the Bank of Switzerland hadn't done so much to undermine it on purpose, just to keep the franc low against the euro and other currencies that it would have appreciated against, which I think was a foolish policy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with allowing your citizens to enjoy a strengthening currency. It's just part of this nonsense that we believe today that weak currency is somehow better than a strong currency.
Yes, and that if I sidestep a bit on the last, you have been through the last administrations, actually two administrations, you have been worried that America would go very much on the left, and in fact, the Biden administration also vindicated that opinion. Now we are again on the second round of the Trump administration, of new Trump administration, and we just hit the 100 days of that. So it's not completely related to gold, but he has been called the Bitcoin president, and with Doge and all that. Now, what do you make of these first 100 days? Is it too little, too late to save the economy, or what's your opinion?
Oh, I mean, to hear Donald Trump talk the other day, this is the greatest first 100 days in the history of the country. I mean, he said that our economy is roaring like never before. And remember, he said we had the worst economy in history when Biden was president. So in a mere 100 days, we've gone from the worst economy in history to the best economy in history. And, not much has changed, really. I mean, we have a different president, but there's been nothing really passed yet, except these tariffs have been announced, and they're tinkering with them. We have had some cuts to the headcount at the government, which is a positive thing. But overall, government spending has gone up. It hasn't gone down. The deficits are getting bigger. They're not getting smaller. So we haven't really changed that much about the underlying structure of the economy or the problems that we have. So from that perspective, I don't think we've accomplished anything that significant in these 100 days. I think that we're headed for a really protracted recession. I think we're in one. I think Trump inherited a recession. It's just that the numbers didn't reflect that, because I don't trust these numbers. But I know what Trump's goal is for the economy, and I would agree with the goal, but I don't think that he's got the right plan for achieving it. In fact, I think in many cases what he's advocating is counterproductive to what he wants, including his advocacy for Bitcoin and trying to make America, the Bitcoin superpower and the crypto capital. That's the last thing that we want to be the capital of. I mean, it's like, we're the Ponzi capital, the digital chain letter. Trump wants us to manufacture more. Well, okay, we need money. We need resources to devote to manufacturing. So we don't want to waste them minting worthless tokens. Why do we want to do that? I mean, who the hell wants all these meme coins or even Bitcoin? And so the more of our resources we waste on crypto, the more dependent we are on imports, because we're not producing the stuff. People don't go to the store because they want to buy crypto. They don't need that. So I think it's unfortunate that Trump is beholden to the donors, and now the people in his administration, like a Howard Lutnick or a David Sachs, or he's got all these big Bitcoin proponents that still have tremendous private interests, and of course now his own family. The family business of Trump, other than selling the Trump name and selling influence to Trump, kind of borrowing a page from Hunter Biden, I guess, just without the cocaine and other drugs and hookers, I assume. I think they're a little bit more wholesome, but they're basically, in the same business of selling influence to the president. In fact, they just opened up a new club, the executive club branch in Washington, D.C., where you pay $500,000 to be able to have access to Trump, and you pay his kid, right? So, I mean, they're just ratcheting this whole thing up. Mm. But so it's very counterproductive that we're trying to divert more of our resources into crypto, really just to benefit the people that are already there, and who are people who help elect Trump, who donated his campaign, who are now part of his administration. They have a lot to gain by pushing everybody into crypto, because they've got the crypto to sell.
Yeah. Now, if Trump's administration fails into reaching the goal of reindustrializing America, and to make clearly they don't want a stronger dollar, they want a weaker dollar. Where do we go from here? What's your prediction for the next 2 years? Is it because I'm one of the leading authors in the prepping and survivalist field, at least in Europe. And I cannot say we're disappointed that there's not been the collapse that we kind of predicted, because it's a long-term collapse. However, now we start to see it really big. Spain just lost power. The European governments are all corrupt. I'm not gonna mention too much about the American one, but certainly there are these kind of problems, and everything is divided. There's no sense of unity anywhere. It's very risky. Where do you see the economy going if Trump fails over the next 2 years?
Well, I mean, I think he's going to fail. I don't see any possibility of success. If, your goal is to reindustrialize the country, the tariffs are not going to produce that outcome. Um, what it will do is I believe that the tariffs will succeed to the extent that they stay in place. I mean, who the hell knows, right? But to the extent that we keep these tariffs, they will succeed in shrinking our trade deficit. I'm pretty sure that that will happen. But it's going to be because we import a lot less, not because we export a lot more. The imports are going to get a lot more expensive. And so we'll import fewer products. But I don't think that they will increase the competitiveness of American manufacturing. In fact, many of our manufacturers may be rendered less competitive because a lot of them depend on imported components that are now going to be more expensive. So we may end up actually weakening the competitive position of our own businesses based on the tariffs. And so they may export less, which will offset some of the benefits of reduced imports. But I think prices will be a lot higher. Not only will prices for imports be higher, but prices for everything else will probably be higher too. Because if Americans aren't buying the imported products because the prices are too high, right, they're going to spend their money on what's still here. So the prices of that stuff's going to go up, right? Yeah. We're not exporting the money anymore. We're bidding up whatever we got. And in the meantime, I'm convinced that we're going to be in a deeper recession because if consumer spending really collapses, retail sales and all that, because the stuff that they want to buy is now too expensive, they can't afford it, we're going to be in a recession. GDP is going to come down, unemployment is going to go up, and the Fed is going to respond by cutting rates. And they've already said now, Powell was finally backed into a corner because before, when he was asked, well, what's your plan for stagflation? Oh, we don't have a plan. It's not going to happen, right? Or we knock wood. I don't see the stag. I don't see the inflation. But now that everybody can see what the Fed was blind to, and Powell has asked, well, what's your response to stagflation? He said, well, we look at both of our goals and we determine which one we're further away from. So my, expectation is if inflation is 4 or 5%, even though that's above 2%, but unemployment spikes up to 7 or 8% and we're in a recession and the Fed has to balance its two goals, it's going to say, all right, yes, inflation is higher than we would like, but this other goal is really further away. We really need to work on the economy. And the Fed will probably just assume if the economy is weak, that the inflation is going to come down by itself, right? Because the weak economy is going to lower inflation. So, hey, we don't have to fight inflation. The economy is going to do that for us. The recession will do that for us. We need to focus on employment, right? So I think what's going to happen as we're in this recession, even though we have elevated inflation, that will be elevated, not just the tariffs, but by the weakening dollar, right? Which is also going to add to the impact. Remember, these politicians promised that if we had tariffs, the dollar would go up. And that's how our trading partners would have to eat our tariffs, is because they would be getting, the exchange rate loss. Well, instead, the dollar went down, which means now we have to pay the tariff and the currency depreciation. But I think the Fed is going to print money and lower rates and just fuel the fire. So now there's going to be more money that's printed, except we're not going to send it to China because the Chinese goods are too expensive. We're just going to try to spend it here. Yep. So it really accelerates the inflation. Yes, I mean, Trump is going to fail. And the problem is he set expectations so high. And not only is he not going to deliver, he's not even going to come close. He's going to, people voted for Trump because he said Biden's got the worst economy in history, the highest inflation in history. Vote for me and all the problems are going to go away. The economy is going to boom like never before. It's going to be a golden age. You're all going to be so rich, you won't be able to stand it. You'll be winning so much, you'll be tired of winning because it's going to be so great. And people are like, okay, yeah, I'm voting for that. And when he delivers a weaker economy than what we had under Biden and stronger inflation than what we had under Biden, it's going to be very bad for the Republican brand. So I think the Republicans end up losing Congress. They'll probably even lose the Senate, which people think there's no way. I mean, how could they do that? I think things will be so bad that they could lose the Senate. I mean, the House is pretty much a foregone conclusion that they're going to lose the House. They've got like a couple of seat margin, and everybody is up for reelection. In the Senate, it's harder to turn it over because only a third of them come up, and but when you have every single House member up for reelection, the public is going to be pretty pissed at the Republican Party, just like they were pissed at the Democratic Party because the economy was lousy. Well, it's going to be even worse, and inflation is going to be higher. And so they want to throw the bums out, right? Well, who are going to be the bums? Well, the Republicans, right? Will be, and so it's not going to bode well on the midterms. And I think if we're still in this recession in 2028, right, it is not going to bode well for the Republicans in the White House either.
And this is why gold is a way to protect against inflation. And it's not the only way, because a lot of assets are inflation proof, but they're harder to, like real estate is harder to calculate. It's harder to cut down, to make little incremental investments. Gold is. Peter, thank you very much for your time. I remind everyone that I'll put the links to Euro Pacific Asset Management and the Peter Schiff Show below in the description of the video, so that people can link and connect to your business should they want to investigate investments. And perhaps the last question, you seem to be pessimistic, but at the same time optimistic in a way. Are you preparing yourself on a personal level for worst case scenarios, security, food shortages, electricity shortages? This is my business, so I wonder if you do something on that to that regard.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of, we have a lot of stuff in the house. We do have a lot of extra food and things that don't, maybe we could always buy more of it. But we did buy a solar powered yacht. So, when we get delivery of that in September, we'll be able to, go around the world, indefinitely on the power of this boat. And so we could live there. We could make our own power. We can make our own water, and we got an ocean, we can fish. So I guess we can, for sure, we could sustain ourselves there. But I don't know that it's going to become that bad. I think I'll be able to buy. I don't think the world is going to stop farming. I think I got gold, I got silver, I could buy stuff. I could exchange my real money for real commodities. I don't think the government's going to confiscate things. Who knows? Maybe I'm just being Pollyanna about that, that we're not going to be that bad. But, I'm very optimistic on the global economy to the extent that it could free itself of the shackles of the dollar and get away from this system of subsidizing profligacy in the United States, where the world has to live beneath its means to make it possible for Americans to live above their means. I think this could be a big positive for the rest of the world. In the long run, it could be a positive for America too, if we do the right thing. If we get shocked into reality, and we make the right reforms, and then we'll be in a better position in the future, because the crisis was going to happen eventually anyway. In fact, I wish it would have happened years and years ago, and we had fixed the problem. So, it's like when you're in a hole, right? The first rule of holes is stop digging. Well, we've been digging for decades. And the more we dig, the deeper the hole we're in, right? So now it's like, the Grand Canyon of holes. So it's going to be hard to get out of it. But we got to start at some point. So I like to be optimistic. And I do think with the new technology that we have today, the promise of AI and all that, and there's so much productivity enhancing benefits of that if we can harness it. So capitalism is a very dynamic system, and it would work better today than ever before. We just have to unleash it, but we have to remove all the problems from the government. So we have to make government a lot smaller. We have to reintroduce sound money. Interest rates need to be higher. And if that means we have to have defaults and bankruptcies along the way, well, that's what it means. But we got to, clean house and get a fresh start, so we can, go back to the type of economic system that made us so successful in the first place. And that's why it's a problem that, so many people think Bitcoin is this alternative when you're just jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. And that may be one of the reasons that, gold has kind of lost its luster with some retail investors in America, because they think that digital gold, is better. When it's not digital gold, it's fool's gold. And I think one of the things we've seen recently is that you can see the correlation of Bitcoin. It's anti-gold. If gold is up, chances are Bitcoin is down, and vice versa. Bitcoin is correlated to tech stocks. When tech stocks go up, Bitcoin goes up. When tech stocks go down, Bitcoin goes.
Why is that? It is puzzling for me. Why is that?
Because it's all about risk. So if you want to buy an expensive tech stock, you're taking a lot of risk. Well, Bitcoin is perceived as some kind of tech. And so it trades with tech stocks, and it's the ultimate risk because it's got no underlying value at all, really. It's just pure speculation. That's why, like, if I wanted to gamble on tech stocks, I'd just buy tech stocks. I wouldn't buy Bitcoin because they're going to go in the same direction. But ultimately, Bitcoin is going to just collapse regardless of what tech stocks do, because it's just a pyramid. And eventually it's going to implode. But in between now and then, it's going to trade like tech stocks. So you might as well actually own the tech stocks, because some of those have value. And yeah, you're overpaying for them, but there's some underlying value there. There's no underlying value really in Bitcoin. So, maybe there's some tiny amount. I don't want to even argue it, but let's say you pay $95,000 for a Bitcoin and there's $1,000 of value there. There's practically no value. Maybe you buy a tech stock and you're paying $100 a share. Maybe it's really worth $20 a share. Maybe the business is worth that, but there's so much speculative froth in there that people are paying a lot more than it's worth. But with Bitcoin, it's almost all speculative froth. So, why even go there?
Very interesting, Peter. Thank you very much. And it's always a pleasure. And I wish you the best for you and your family for the remainder of the year. And we'll speak again.
All right. Thanks, Piero.
Take care.
Till next time.
Till next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.